Hi, everyone, and welcome to the third episode of the Divine Rhapsody. And this is your friend, Falguni. So, I wanted this episode to be something different, about something different. And I went around scavenging through my old books and diaries and notes, and I came across this book. A book that I gifted myself a few years ago. Okay, I'm not an avid reader, but I love short stories. Yeah, and this is this incredible book. World's Greatest Short Stories. And when I read the contents page, I instantly fell in love with it and I bought it. Though I was in that bookshop with no intention of buying anything, but I ended up buying this book. And I'm really glad that I did. So, in this episode, I want to talk about one of my favorite stories from this book, The Coffee House of Surat by Leo Tolstoy. The most amazing part of this story is no matter how long ago it was written, how outdated the society was when this story was written, it's still relevant in our world today. And in a very sad way. It's unfortunate that we still have the same problems and we are still struggling with these things. So this story is about a lot of people in a coffee house in Surat who are arguing about faith, about what God is and what's the right way to worship God. And a lot of people from different countries, from different religions, different faiths, they're arguing and there's this heated argument. And then there's this one guy, this Chinaman, who's a student of Confucius. He's sitting in one corner, sipping his coffee, minding his own business, when one person from the heated argument manages to pull him into the conversation. And he asks him about his opinion on the topic. To which this guy says, the Chinaman says, "Sirs, it seems to me that it is chiefly pride that prevents men from agreeing with one another on matters of faith. If you care to listen to me, I will tell you a story which will explain this by example. I came here from China on an English steamer which had been round the world. We stopped for fresh water and landed on the east coast on the island of Sumatra. It was midday, and some of us, having landed, sat in the shade of some coconut palms by the seashore, not far away from a native village. We were a party of men of different nationalities. As we sat there, a blind man approached us. We learned afterwards that he had gone blind from gazing too long and too persistently at the sun, trying to find out what it was in order to seize its light. He strove a long time to accomplish this, constantly looking at the sun, but the only result was that his eyes were injured by its brightness and he became blind. Then he said to himself, 'The light of the sun is not a liquid, for if it were a liquid, it would be possible to pour it from one vessel to another, and it would be moved like water by the wind. Neither is it fire, for if it were fire, water would extinguish it. Neither is it light a spirit. Neither is light a spirit, for it is seen by the eye. Nor is it matter, for it cannot be moved. Therefore, as the light of the sun is neither liquid, nor fire, nor spirit, nor matter, it is nothing. So ironic. So, he argued, and as a result of always looking at the sun and always thinking about it, he lost both his sight and his reason. And when he went quite blind, he became fully convinced that the sun did not exist. With this blind man came a slave, who, after placing his master in the shade of a coconut tree, picked up a coconut from the ground and began making it into a night light. He twisted a wick from the fiber of the coconut, squeezed oil from the nut in the shell, and soaked the wick in it. As the slave sat doing this, the blind man sighed and said to him, "Well, slave, was it not right when I told you there is no sun? Do you not see how dark it is? Yet people say there is a sun, but if so, where is it?" "I do not know what the sun is," said the slave. "That is no business of mine. But I know what light is. Here I have made a night lamp, by the help of which I can serve you and find anything I want in the hut." And the slave picked up the coconut shell, saying, "This is my son." A lame man with crutches who was sitting nearby heard these words and laughed. "You have evidently been blind all your life," he said to the blind man, "not to know what the sun is. I will tell you what it is. The sun is a ball of fire which rises every morning out of the sea and goes down again among the mountains of our island each evening. We have all seen this, and if you had had your eyesight too, you would have seen it." A fisherman who had been listening to the conversation said, "It is plain enough that you have never been beyond your own island. If you were not lame, and if you had been out, as I have, in a fishing boat, you would know that the sun does not set among the mountains of your island, but as it rises from the ocean every morning, so it sets again in the sea every night. What I am telling you is true, for I have seen it every day with my own eyes." Then an Indian, who was of our party, interrupted him by saying, I am astonished that a reasonable man should talk such nonsense. How can a ball of fire possibly descend into the water and not be extinguished? The sun is not a ball of fire at all. It is the deity named Deva, who rides forever in a chariot around the golden mountain, Meru. Sometimes the evil serpents, Ragu and Ketu, attack Deva and swallow him, and then the earth is dark. But our priests pray that the deity may be released and then he is set free. Only such ignorant men as you, who have never been beyond their own island, can imagine that the sun shines for their own country. Then the master of an Egyptian vessel, who was present, spoke in his turn. No, said he, you also are wrong. The sun is not a deity, and does not move only round India and its golden mountain. I have sailed much on the Black Sea and along the coasts of Arabia, and have been to Madagascar and to the Philippines. The sun lights the whole earth and not India alone. It does not circle round any one mountain, but rises far in the east, beyond the Isles of Japan, and sets far, far away in the west, beyond the islands of England. That is why the Japanese call their country Nippon. That is, the birth of the sun. I know this very well, For I have myself seen much and heard more from my grandfather, who sailed to the very ends of the sea. He would have gone on, but an English sailor from our ship interrupted him. There is no country where people know so much about the sun's movement as in England. The sun, as everyone in England knows, rises nowhere and sets nowhere. It is always moving round the earth. We can be sure of this, for we have just been round the world ourselves, and nowhere knocked up against the sun. Wherever we went, the sun showed itself in the morning and hid itself at night, just as it does here. And the Englishman took a stick and started drawing circles in the sand, trying to explain how the sun moves in the heavens and around the world. But he was unable to explain it clearly. So he pointed the stick to a ship's pilot and said, "This man knows more about it than I do. He can explain it properly." The pilot, who was an intelligent man, had listened in silence to the talk till he was asked to speak. Now everyone turned to him and he said, "You all are misleading one another and are yourselves deceived. The sun does not go around the earth, but the earth goes around the sun, revolving as it goes and turning towards the sun in the course of each 24 hours. Not only Japan and the Philippines and Sumatra where we are now, but Africa and Europe and America and many lands besides. The sun does not shine for one mountain, or for some one island, or for some one sea, nor for one earth alone, but for other planets as well as our earth. If you would only look up at the heavens instead of at the ground beneath your own feet, you might all understand this, and would then no longer suppose that the sun shines for you or for your country alone." Thus spoke the wise pilot, who had voyaged much about the world and had gazed much upon the heavens above. So this last part of the story is where this Chinaman ends the story. This is where the Chinaman ends the story in Leo Tolstoy's story. And then the Chinaman says, "So on matters of faith, it is pride that causes error and discord among men. As with the sun, so it is with God. Each man wants to have a special God of their own, or at least a special God for their native land. Each nation wishes to confine in its own temples him whom the whole world cannot contain. Can any temple compare with that which God Himself has built to unite all men in one faith and one religion? All human temples are built on the model of this temple, which is God's own world. Every temple has its own fonts, its vaulted roof, its lamps, its pictures or sculptures, its inscriptions, its books of law, its offerings, its altars, and its priests. But in what temple is there such a font as the ocean, such a vault as that of the heavens, such lamps as the sun, moon, and stars, or any figures to be compared with living, loving, mutually helping men? Where are there any records of God's goodness so easy to understand as the blessings which God has strewed abroad from man's happiness? Where is there any book of law so clear to each man as that written in his heart? What sacrifice equals the self-denials which loving men and women make for one another? And what altar can be compared with the heart of a good man, on which God Himself accepts the sacrifice? The higher a man's conception of God, the better he will know him. And the better he knows God, the nearer he will be drawn to him, imitating his goodness, his mercy, and his love of man. Therefore, let him who sees the sun's whole light filling the world refrain from blaming or despising the superstitious man, who in his own idol sees one ray of that same light. Let him not despise even the unbeliever who is blind and cannot see the sun at all. So spoke the Chinaman, the student of Confucius, and all who were present in the coffee house were silent and disputed no more as to whose faith was the best. So the crux of this story is that we all have our own perception of God. We have our own meaning for faith. And I understand that that is something very personal, and we feel these things very strongly in ourselves. But we also need to understand that it is unique for everyone. You cannot enforce what you know on somebody else, because we all are unique. Our life experiences are unique. How we see God, how we understand God, how we love God, or how we even hate God is very personal. In a polarized society like today, like the one we live in today, 21st century educated people, so many institutions of education all around the world, and still we fight. We fight for God. In the name of God, but actually not for God. We fight only because of pride, ego. We want to be significant. We want validation. Like if I believe in myself, if I believe in something, but I don't believe in myself, okay. And if that person also, if I'm able to convince that person that I'm right, I might start believing in myself. I might think that I'm right. Okay, yeah, now I feel confident. I am right because this guy is convinced. So this whole concept of brainwashing, this whole concept of this race, or this what do we say, following one concept because of which our society is falling apart all over the world. We need to understand this, that there's nothing, no God, no kind of God, no God will ever ask humans to fight in its name. Because God did not start religion, humans did. And those people probably were incredible storytellers. And they saw miracles, they saw God's miracles, and then they shaped societies, got shaped through time, and then people started just, getting blind by that guy who was trying to look at the sun and sees its light. They got blinded and they were like, whatever, what I know is what I know. That's all that is. Because that's how his ego limited him. That rather than being able to look more into the matter of what the sun was, he was completely deprived of the option. That you know what, your ego is too high, you're too prideful, and you're going to blind yourself. And that's exactly what most of us are in this world. We are blinded by pride. And we are victims of pride and low self-confidence. That we are looking around for validation. That the more people who believe in what I believe, the more good I'm going to feel about myself. The more confident I'm going to feel about myself. That I'm not an idiot. So you know what? That is only lack of self-confidence. Because someone who is confident about himself or herself doesn't need to go around convincing people. That person does not seek validation. Prideful people do. Prideful people and low self-esteem, low self-confident people do. They go around looking for validation, and narcissists, of course. But pride, low self-esteem, low self-confidence, low self-trust. This is, again, going back to my previous episode, why the Pandora's box, in which I was talking about low self-trust and low self-confidence. So this is how I think these concepts of low self-confidence and trust issues and pride are very resonant in this story by Leo Tolstoy. I really like Leo Tolstoy. The way he's written everything, it's so... There's no... He's explained it very, very clearly in very simple words, and now I know why they say we should read. But if you wish to read the story yourself, it is The Coffee House of Surat by Leo Tolstoy. I hope you liked this story. I hope you liked the whole conversation around it. And if you want to have a conversation about this, please reach out to me on Instagram, because I think this is a very hot topic where, concept of world, of God and religion and faith comes in a conversation. I think it gets very tricky, but I'm not looking for validation. I'm just here to tell my story. So, tell me if you're on the same page. And even if you're not, I'd love to have a conversation with you. So please reach out to me on Instagram. And thank you for hanging on till the end of this episode. I hope you liked it. And be healthy, be safe. And until next time, bye-bye.